Welcome, everyone, to episode 42 of the RDH Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chad, joined alongside me by my brother, Tanner. Hang in there, dude.
It's good. We had a good all weekend of football. It was probably not what a lot of people wanted, but it's what happened. And the Spurs won a game against the Timberwolves, which was awesome. Watched some of that game. That was very exciting. What else is new? What else is new? And not a lot, but that's pretty much it. I'm ready to talk some of this championship round football that all the controversy is had it up to be.
We've had a lot of controversy, and today, Tanner hit on it. Today, we're talking college football and the NFL. We got some college football quarterback prospects, breakdown and rankings that we're going to go through. We got a game. That's right. That's right. We got our first game on this show. It's called Game Time. That's gonna be the new segment. Game Time, baby. Which NFL team needs a quarterback? Who they are, and who they're going to draft. We're also going to hit, the latest NFL news, and lastly, some playoff football updates, like Tanner said. One note I have to say, I know that some fans that listen to this show are soccer fans. We will start talking Champions League back when it gets back February 13th. Just wanted to give that note out there for everybody. Welcome in, RDH Sports Podcast. Today, like I said, we're talking football. So, Tanner, we're going to jump right into this college football talk. So, have on Instagram, rdh.sports, and we have a website, rdhsports.net. We release all of these quarterback rankings on there already, so you can go ahead and check them out there. Or you can listen to this segment as well. We're pretty much just breaking down those quarterbacks that are, there's a lot this draft. So what I'm going to do is break down number 9, number 1. Yes, this is ranked. I've already written out these scouting reports and everything, so we're going to start right now with a kid that you might know. His name is Jordan Travis. He's the quarterback for Florida State, senior. My draft grade on this player is a late 4th round. My draft projection on this player is a 4th round pick. So I'm going to go ahead and read my scouting report that I have on him. A really heartbreaking way to end your college career with the injury that Travis suffered. If he wouldn't have gotten injured, there's no way Florida State is out of the college football playoff. Travis won 11 games his senior season and followed that with a 20-7 touchdown interception ratio. And he's the biggest reason that Florida State had their success this season. Without him, Florida State is not undefeated. And my biggest takeaways from him is watch how fast this quarterback gets rid of the ball. Multiple games where opposing defensive linemen were in his face, and there was no problem for him to get rid of that ball. The average quarterback would have taken a sack in that situation. So that's the reason that I have a 4 on him right there. Is just that trait alone, his ability to escape at the very end. It's pretty elite. And this prospect is intriguing, but due to his injury, we're going to see how far he falls in the NFL draft. And I have a feeling this quarterback will be starting within the first 3 years. And first year is completely sits. He does not play at all. He completely sits behind offense, gets some NFL coaching in there. His sophomore season or his second season, I see him getting very limited number of snaps in there. And then that third year is kind of where you can take the reins off and let him go. But this is a project quarterback, and this is number 9 on our board. Jumping to number 8, if you watched high school football, specifically the quarterback show on Netflix a couple years ago, this kid was in it. I watched it. Spencer Rattler. He's a quarterback from South Carolina. He's been all over the board. Went to Oklahoma as well. Draft grade, I got a late 4th round on the player. Draft projection, I got him in the 4th round. So he's a really promising prospect coming out of high school, but fell down the college quarterback ranks as the season went on. 3 seasons at Oklahoma, 2 at South Carolina. Stats don't jump off the paper at all throughout college, except his 2020 season. By far was his best season with over 3,000 passing yards, 28 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. To me, this prospect is who will go, and he'll go in the later rounds, like I'm saying. And a team will take a chance on him. His tape is not consistent enough to take him in the first 4 rounds, but teams, they'll probably stretch him and get him in the 4th, in my opinion. Rounds 4 through 5 is where I'm seeing he's going to go. And he shows flashes of brilliance, I'll be honest. He shows flashes of it and can make throws look easy at times, but he's got to continue to play like his 2020 season consistently if he wants to start in the NFL. That's number 8 on our rankings. We have Michael Pratt, who's number 7 on our rankings. He's the quarterback from Tulane. I know, you're right. I'm watching a quarterback from Tulane. Yes, I've watched a ton of games of this kid. His draft grade for me is a late 3rd round. Draft projection is an early 3rd round. To get into these top 5 prospects too, I'm going to jump over to Tanner, and he's going to have some notes on these guys as well. But these are a little bit later round guys. Michael Pratt, so his best season was his sophomore season, where he also threw for over 3,000 yards, 27 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and had 10 rushing touchdowns there. So if you think about that, he's getting almost 40 touchdowns in production by himself. It's not too bad his sophomore season. One of the best games I saw of his was against FAU, and he was on fire. First thing I noticed when I turned on the tape is how crisp Pat's throwing mechanics already are. He looks the position with his size and strength as well. If this player tests well at the NFL Combine and his pro day, I think he may have a chance to jump up on some boards, but he needs to sit to be ready within 2 seasons. So I don't see this player starting within the first 2 seasons. To the next guy, we have J.J. McCarthy. Tanner knows this player. The quarterback from Michigan. He's a junior. This is where we're starting to get in the second round grades. So we jumped from a fourth round to a second round. I don't have any third round quarterback prospects in this draft. Not sure if I've ever had that before when I'm scouting prospects. Now I've only scouted 9, or actually 10, or like 11 or 12, but I haven't had the other scouting reports done yet. So I haven't put him on pen to paper yet. But going back to JJ McCarthy, I didn't know if he was gonna back to Michigan or if he was gonna declare to the NFL. He declared to the NFL, and then next thing, Jim Harbaugh goes to the NFL. So hey, we could see him in Los Angeles, but who knows? A quarterback who's gotten better each season, knows how to perform on the biggest stages, and the Rose Bowl game against Alabama was no different. I don't think anybody expected J.J. McCarthy to go up there and shred the Alabama defense like he did. That was Nick Saban's last coaching for his game in his college career, which is kind of crazy to think about it. And J.J. McCarthy just diced that dude up. Michigan leaned on him more than ever this season, and he's proven that he can take on everything that is thrown his way. He has great ball accuracy and is a pocket passing quarterback at the next level. He does not have the scrambling ability. He should sit and learn his first season as well. Give him a chance in his sophomore season and/or his second season. This prospect should go to a team where he can learn from a veteran and then give him keys to the castle. This is a guy where I don't think he should start the first year. I don't think he should play at all his first year. Really think you should be in a veteran team and be looking to move on from your veteran quarterback in the next 2-3 seasons. 3 seasons being maximum, next 2 seasons being ideal. A team that comes to mind for me about this kid is going to be the New York Jets, but I don't know how high the Jets will actually draft a quarterback because this kid's probably going to go in the first 2 rounds. What did you see J.J. McCarthy in college, Tanner? Were you impressed with this player?
I think it's I was impressed in a lot of moments, and a lot of other moments kind of were like he doesn't really need to do much. You know what I mean? Like that's just what that Michigan team was. So it's kind of hard to evaluate him, being with all the talent around him. But I don't know. I like him a lot. I think that you kind of hit it on the head when you said he steps up in the biggest of stages, and that's really like one of those intangibles that you kind of like look for in a quarterback. And not to mention too, he was the leader of a national champion team. So you already know that he has the leadership capabilities, and he can win over a locker room, with big names coming out of college. Like we got that big all-star Blake Corum, and to reel someone like that in, obviously it takes a lot of leadership skills. And I think, he's going to develop over time slowly in the NFL. Like you said, obviously not a starter coming out, but, he can absolutely learn everything else. Like all the other like little stuff that you need as a quarterback, he has. So I like him a lot, but definitely a raw prospect, but he's shown flashes of stuff that he could do in the higher level.
There you go. Number 5, jump into a quarterback that is also a senior. A lot of senior quarterbacks that are going to be taken in the first round. A lot of transfer quarterbacks that are going to be taken in the first round as well. This kid's potentially going to go in the first. We'll see. But this is Bo Nix, quarterback from Oregon, senior. I have a mid second round draft grade on the player, and then my draft projection on him is a late first, early second. I really do think Bo's going to fall to the second round. I'm not sure he's going to be that last quarterback in the first round, but I think he's going to be the first quarterback taken in the second round, if I'm not mistaken. He's a 5-year player. Could have entered the draft after his 2022 season, which is kind of crazy to think about. But instead, he came back to Oregon and led the Ducks to another great season. Ability to roll out of the pocket and make throws on the run is his best trait. See Nix going to a West Coast style offense in the NFL, especially with his running ability. Nix relies on his legs tremendously and reminds me a lot of former Ole Miss quarterback Chad Kelly. And in college, with his scrambling ability specifically, when Kelly got in situations he needed to get out of there and he got out quick, Nix looks the exact same. I also love the ability to throw the medium ball extremely well. Minimal interceptions in college, and he progressively gets better each season. Mention I could easily see him going in the first couple rounds of the NFL draft, like I said. So best traits of Bo Nix is his medium accuracy. I think his medium accuracy is elite. I don't necessarily think his deep accuracy is there. I think he's one of the lower end prospects in terms of deep accuracy, but short and medium accuracy. This kid is on the money. Um, Biggest question I have of him is how much is he going to scramble? How much can he scramble in the NFL? Because you saw kind of first look, second look, ball out in the NFL, right? It was almost first look, kind of wait, second look, okay, let's scramble now, right? So it's like I need to see those progressions kind of go up a little bit, and I could also see why that makes him kind of go into the second round. What did you think of Bo Nix, Tanner? I know you watched him against those Washington games where he came up short this season a couple times, but solid prospect.
I mean, he's very good. Like like you said, he's been in college for 5 years, so he's obviously getting better, and he's learning from a lot of different other programs too. So he's expanding his skill set, which is something you want to see, and he's staying consistent over those times with different coaching staffs, and just leading his team to good seasons. It's that's hard to do, I would say, in the NCAA, especially with all the competition that there is out there, and he's just continuously, he's going around, and making a name for himself. Like, there's a reason that I think he's as high up as he is. Like, number 5 on your board, I think is, it's not the sexiest number, but like there's a lot of quarterback prospects coming out, and he's not a bad one at all. So if you take a chance on him, I don't think that you're going to be, immediately rewarded. We could be wrong, but I think that, he has a lot of like, those, like I said, again, the leadership skills and just like an ability to learn. He's quick learning. Obviously, if you see him in those systems and you see him practice and play, like he's continuously getting better, like you said, over the season. So I like him a lot. I got to watch him play a couple times in person, which was really cool. And he's he's not he's not gonna blow you out of the water, but he's definitely very consistent, and he doesn't make the biggest of mistakes and like the biggest moments. He's very good at you know, managing the game and doing what he needs to do to win.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This is going to be an unpopular opinion, but I grade quarterbacks a lot differently than the experts do. That's probably why you found us and listened to this show. Partly because hey, we've nailed a lot of draft prospects on this show. We've nailed a lot of them, and this is another one that I think I'm going to nail. It's going to be unpopular. Drake May. He's my number 4. Number 4, Drake May. That's right. Usually he's number 2 consensus on everybody's board, but number 4 for me. He's from Duke. He's a sophomore. Draft grade to me is a mid to late first round. To be honest, I almost want to take the mid out. I think I have Drake May as a late first round, and his draft projection to me is going to be early first round and or be the second quarterback off the board. He excels at throwing the deep ball. The ability to get rid of the ball quickly is also at top of this class. His best season was his first season as a full-time quarterback with over 4,200 passing yards, 37 touchdowns, 700 rushing yards. This season, May had 3,600 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, 500 rushing yards, but 9 interceptions. That's almost a 2-to-1 interception ratio. That's pretty scary coming out of college. That's a huge red flag for me personally. He needs some time to sit and gain experience in a comfortable scheme. The consensus number 2 quarterback among experts, but not here. He's a first-round player on the board, but I need to see a ton of improvement on decision-making and trying to fit the ball in windows that are already closed. You see that to be honest, if an NFL person listening to this podcast, I'm not comparing him to these guys, but when Dak Prescott has an oh shit moment and Lamar Jackson has an oh shit moment, this is what Drake May reminds me of when he throws interceptions. It's not an interception to where it's like, oh, I see what he saw there. It's that was double coverage. That was triple coverage. Like classically in this past Baltimore Ravens game at the end of the game when Lamar threw to Isaiah Likely in triple coverage. I saw a lot of throws like that for Drake May. His receivers didn't drop a ton of balls at Duke. That's the biggest knock on him is his turnovers. And in the NFL, your turnovers tend to get a little bit more than they did in college. So I need to see those turnovers go down a lot. And I also need to see the decision making a little bit more quick. And that to me is scary because if your decision making is already not at the top of the elite level coming into the NFL, I think that's where quarterbacks struggle the most personally. That's why Drake May is number 4 on my board. Yes, he's still a first round quarterback prospect to me. But realistically, I don't see this kid being in the NFL long term. I could be wrong, but to me, he seems a bit raw. hey, you never know if he goes to an NFL team where he actually sits and the coach is a quarterback guy and he sits behind the right guy and learns, then we'll see what happens. But right now, I think Drake May is a late first round pick for me, in my opinion, and it's a big question mark if I was an NFL executive if I would actually take him on my team. What do you think of Drake May? Did you see a lot of this player, Tanner?
I haven't watched a ton of Drake May, but I mean, you know, from what I have seen of him, it's just he likes slinging that thing. Like it's he's just ripping it down the field, and it's just you have those prospects like that come out, and it's just remember like Josh Allen when he came out, and it's like oh I don't know small school, he likes to sling it. Obviously we see how that turned out, and I understand why the experts like him the way they do, but you know comparing a quarterback to like current players and stuff like that, and comparing him to like what he could be as opposed to like what he is right now, and what he wants to be is two completely different things too. Like I said with Josh Allen, that you know when he was coming out, he was a slinger and small school guy, so you didn't really know if he could do it at the big levels. But go look at like Zach Wilson out of BYU. Everyone was comparing him to the next Patrick Mahomes, the way that he extends his plays and the way that the way that he conducts his game. And that didn't happen at all in the NFL. And he was taken very, very early. So I think, betting on what a guy is right now is, it's hard to say that, with these smaller school guys, I'm not saying Duke is like the ultimate small school, but it's definitely not, like Alabama or it's not Georgia. You don't have tape against like really, really good opponents. But, I think it's a lot harder to evaluate him. So I understand why you're putting him as low as you do, but he's kind of, one of these guys that doesn't have experience, out of all these guys on the list. You said he's a sophomore and you just don't know what he can become yet. So I think your evaluation is very. I agree with you. A lot on what it is. But you know, if he's slinging that rock, you know I'm all about it, Chad. You got I gotta love myself a gunslinger. So we'll see what happens. But I like the kid. I like him a lot.
And like we're saying, like we're bashing this kid like he's a fifth round pick. We're not. He's a first round pick.
Yeah,
At
exactly.
the end of the day, like this kid's going to go in the first round. There's no way he doesn't. He's a sophomore. To me, I wanted him to come back to his junior season. I totally understand why he didn't. You're already being thrown around as a number 2 quarterback prospect, and you have guys in this year, then I get it, right? I understand it, but you nailed it perfectly. Zach Wilson is someone who I see in this player. I didn't want to say his name, but that's who I see in this player a lot of. But
And
the thing
that's
is,
like a
is
worst case scenario. You know what I mean? Not like obviously like the direct comparison.
yes, 100%. The thing with Zach Wilson coming out of college is coming out of BYU, like he did sling the rock.
Mm.
He had a bit of an interception problem, and so does Drake May. But we'll see what happens with this prospect. We'll in our game. We'll tell you where we think he's going to go. Number 3 on my board, the Heisman winner, Jaden Daniels, quarterback from LSU. He's also a senior. My draft grade on this player is a mid to late first round. Draft projection is an early first to mid first round pick. There's a reason Daniels won the Heisman Trophy this season. He combined for almost 5,000 yards passing and receiving, 3 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. Let me repeat that one more time. 1,000 total yards passing and receiving, 50 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. 5-year player who had one of the best seasons in college football history, 3 years at Arizona State, 2 years at LSU. His ability to do pretty much anything while being accurate with the football is unmatched. Not sure I've ever seen anything like it. And a note I want to hit on is he averaged over 8 yards a carry this season, and his arm is his best weapon. But a couple questions I have about this prospect. I the jump from his junior year to his senior year. Question, how do you rate the other 4 years of play of this player? So, State, his games don't jump out at you. I can tell you that right now. He has a couple games throughout his 3 years there that jumped out, but not a ton. And last year, when I asked the junior to senior year question, he played at LSU last year. He played at LSU his junior season, and he did not have a good season. And you didn't really know if he was going to be the starting quarterback going into the next season, but he was. He continued to retain the starting job and ended up winning a Heisman and had the season like I said. So, the reason I have this player graded so high is because, once again, 1,000 passing yards and 50 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. It's a stat line that is rookie mode on NCAA 14 like. stat line that is insane, right? And you can't not take this guy in the first round. I understand it could be an air quotes, a fluke season. SEC, it's not. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? If you can channel this season for him, not only is he a starting quarterback, he arguably had as close or if not better year than Joe frickin' Burrow did at LSU when he won the Heisman. So that's where I rate this guy. He's not number two, he's number three. The only reason he's not number two in this year's draft because I watched the Arizona State games and I watched the LSU games. That's right. I didn't just watch this year. I watched all other 4 years of the games, and you cannot throw that tape out completely. You got to keep it a little bit in there in the back of your mind. So that's why he's number three for me. Those other 4 years were just not consistent enough. But Tanner, Jaden Daniels, you like a gunslinger? This guy can do that and much more. What do you think about this guy?
This is like Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson had a love baby, and he's entering the NFL draft, and this is that player. And I think too that it's really important that you mentioned Joe Burrow because kind of that was like the staple for like quarterbacks coming out of the NFL draft. I think for in recent memory, everyone wants to see that jump, wants to see that leadership, and wants to see that confidence coming out of college, especially after Joe Burrow had left Ohio State, went to LSU, betting on himself, stuff like that. And then he became the player that he is. And I think that this is an okay thing now. I think you look at, Jaden Daniels' journey and the fact that he has gotten better. And he made this statement this year with 50 touchdowns, and which is absolutely insane. And I think that's okay. I think it's fine if all your tape isn't the most amazing because you're supposed to be getting better. You're not supposed to come out the gate being the best player. You're supposed to be getting better over time, and that's what this kid did. Why such the big jump between this past season and the one that just ended? He could have just been on it. You know what I mean? Like he finally decided like, all right, this is it. This is my senior year. I'm gonna go ham, and he did. And I think you got to give him a lot of credit for that. I don't think you should not. I don't think you should knock him as hard for his previous seasons, but this one that jumped out of the page, I think that's his new standard. And I think that he's going to work a lot, very, very hard and have like that mindset, because he knows how if you win a Heisman, in my opinion, it just puts you ahead of a lot of other guys. You look at the previous Heisman candidates who done it, and they've had a lot of success in the NFL. Be it all temporary success or long-term success. But I think success is still, theirs for the taking. So I like him a lot. I really do. I think that his game is going to translate very well, especially now that you have these new age offensive systems in the NFL, these high-flying offenses that are also, RPO. Like, go look at the Philadelphia Eagles, like, amazing, very, very similar kind of player to Jalen Hurts, in my opinion. So it's just like that's kind of like where I could see him going to a system like that, give him a coach that knows how to use him, and he could be an absolute weapon. But there's a lot of ifs in that statement. So he's got to continue to get better. He's got to continue to play at the level that he is, and if he doesn't, he's not going to be that great. But I like him. I like where you put him. I like him at number 3. I think that he's a very good player.
Yeah, and really understandable about the other years of tape. I kind of really like your approach that you took on that. Right, this year. It's really hard to argue this season.
Mm-hmm.
Right, it's like if you can replicate this past season, the other 4 years of tape literally don't matter, and they don't. Right, but yeah, I'm really interested to see where he goes too, because like I said, he averaged 8 yards a carry, and his arm's his best weapon.
Mm-hmm.
So he's a guy that could. He's a game changer. He's an absolute game changer if he continues to go on this pace right now, is all I have to say, and easily a franchise quarterback if he continues this season. 2, Michael Penix Jr., quarterback from Washington, senior, draft grade for me, mid first round, draft projection, mid to late first round. Penix Jr. is a big body quarterback. It's 6'3", 213, and he's a lefty. He had a great season in 2022 where his passer rating was over 100, threw for 4,600 yards and 31 touchdowns. He continued to get better over the season as well, which is key to progression. This key took down Oregon this season, and it was impressive to say the least. Heisman Trophy candidate, an easy first-round pick in the NFL draft. Really liked the long ball ability and be able to hit the dime on the sidelines. Watched a play where he was backpedaling against Oregon with defenders in his face and completed a 50-yard. Unbelievable was the last thing I had on him. The game I want to call out is his playoff game. This year, his playoff game. I think Odunze, the wide receiver from there, his counterpart, he's going to be number 2. in the draft, in my opinion. But that was a game where you saw how good he was, and Michael Penix Jr. did throw him open, and it's really hard to do when you have a wide receiver that good. The reason I also have Michael Penix Jr. above Daniels is because his years are more consistent. His last 4 years are more consistent, but the big question mark with him, Michael Penix Jr. has gotten injured every single season, or finished a full season. So as an NFL GM, how much do you evaluate that, right? How much do you value injury with your quarterback? Probably number 1 or number 2, right? Being a leader. So does he drop down boards because of his injury history? And does he jump up boards because of this season of play alone? I think he has to, right? And I think to watch that college football playoff game, really hard to argue that this is not an NFL starting quarterback. He looked the part, he destroyed Texas. So, in my opinion, I understand that Texas's corners aren't necessarily the best in college football, but not I don't know if another quarterback in college football, Caleb Williams included, had a better performance and looked as good as Michael Penix Jr. did. If he can lock that in every game in the NFL, he's going to be a starter within the first season, not even the first couple seasons. But what did you see this lefty from Washington?
I think he's you look at that national championship, you look at that final game against Michigan. Obviously, it wasn't his best game, and that's probably the game that a lot of people are going to look at because it's literally the biggest stage. And yes, it wasn't all his fault, but I think some of it was his fault. I think a lot of what people are saying about this guy is he's a tough fighter. He doesn't like shy to the spotlight. He's up there. He's very good with the big moments. He's good with all the big time chances that he gets. And I think in the national championship you saw kind of just a little bit of a bad game from him, which is unfortunate. But which is why, in my opinion, I think it's good at number 2. Every other game that he's played this season though has been on the money without a doubt. Confidence 100%. Even when that team was down in that national championship, he was still fighting. He was still putting in 110%, 150%, 200%. Like this guy he's going to give it his all every single time. And I think that's what you really, really want in a leader and a quarterback specifically, someone who's going to go out there and work harder than anyone else in the field. And that is just, like you said, it's an NFL quarterback. That's what that is. They're not, my lovely Johnny Manziel over there who's putting in 0%. So it's it's kind of like par for the course in the NFL, and I think he checks that box right off. And it was his first national championship. You can say some excuses, but I think the games are a lot bigger in the NFL, and it looks like he doesn't really shy to the spotlight. So one of the best games from a quarterback I've seen in recent memory in the college football playoffs, except for, of course, Joe Burrow's legendary run against Texas with Michael Penix. But I really like the kid. I really like him a lot, and I think that will be a future franchise quarterback just based on like the intangibles that we kind of talked about with a couple other guys. The technique, the stuff like that, it can be taught, and he has a really good head start on a lot of other guys. Put him in the right system with a quarterbacks coach and someone who just lets him throw it around, and I think you're gonna have a really good quarterback.
Exactly. Give him some veteran wide receivers as well. Number 1 quarterback. I don't think this is a surprise to anybody if you've been listening to this podcast at all. He's a junior's draft grade. He is the top prospect in this graph for me, meaning the number 1 prospect. Draft projection for me is the number 1 overall pick, early first round. Caleb Williams, like I said. He's an exciting prospect. Not only does he have elite instincts, but he's levels above his competition. He has every single box checked. The best player in college football, slam dunk number 1 overall pick. This quarterback is ready to step on the NFL field tomorrow and will be an elite playmaker at the next level, elite IQ and passing ability, and the throws are made with ease, and that's just something you can't teach. Tanner and I, fortunately enough, got to watch him against UCLA, where he completed about a 70-something yard touchdown bomb. This guy is. I don't know if I've seen a prospect that is this good. I put him on the level of Trevor Lawrence coming out of college out of Clemson, and I put Trevor Lawrence on the Andrew Luck coming out of Stanford level. So and those are the only 3 guys that I've given that level to. Joe Burrow, not give that level to. So I didn't get Joe Burrow right on that one. It was also 1 season. He was still a first round grade for me, but not tippy top. Missed that one. But Caleb Williams, I don't think I'm going to miss. Like I said, elite IQ, that's something you can't teach. If you have elite IQ and elite decision making, that there's nothing you can do to teach those. In my opinion, you either have that or you don't. Um, I don't know if I ever saw a college player out of more plays than Caleb Williams. And the last thing I want to say about Caleb Williams is, when he throws, looks just like Aaron Rodgers. I mean, a carbon copy of Aaron Rodgers, rolling out ever so slightly, flick of the wrist, and it's 60, 70 yards down the field. I think you're going to see this player on his pro day, and if he even participates in the NFL Combine, because he doesn't need to. But you're going to see some stuff from him in the NFL, and I do think, we'll jump into this next segment now. Tanner can also give his breakdown on Caleb Williams, but I do think that Caleb Williams will go number one to Chicago. I don't think that they keep Justin Fields there when they have this guy sitting there. If Caleb Williams was not in this draft, yes, I don't think you take Drake May number one overall, but this is a guy that you cannot miss on. This is a Myles Garrett at the defensive end position. It was just it was a lock. It was a complete lock. You had an argument in the Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields draft because those guys were so close in college. I don't think anybody's close to Caleb Williams, in my opinion. And another guy I listen to a lot is, a lot of different NFL experts. I won't say specific names, but a ton of them. Some of them are Dallas Cowboys. Most of them are Dallas Cowboy guys. Uh, Mr. Brian Broaddus. Just kidding. I won't say the name. Dane Brugler. Also like him a lot. So anytime I got those guys, I'm gonna listen to them. So Caleb Williams number one for me, pretty easy, and I think he's going to Chicago no matter unless Chicago trades that pick. But what did you see when we saw Caleb Williams in person? I know they got destroyed. What do you think about this guy? Because I'm interested.
I mean, I'm kind of glad we went to the game that we did. It's a rivalry game, and UCLA kind of whooped up on USC. But in that loss, Caleb Williams still looked like a very, very good player. It just kind of looked like no one else around him was helping. You go back to the previous season when he was absolutely, lighting the charts up. And he had a lot of help at wide receiver. Specifically Jordan Addison. When he was back at USC, and that was his boy. You combine him with someone who's got speed, who can, knock the top off of a defense, and that ball's going to be delivered right in his bread box every single time. This USC team was not the best overall in terms of just a team, and he still managed to be, a player that everyone looked out for, a player that everyone was, expecting to do well. And, he didn't have every single game go his way, but I think he still played well in a lot of the games that he played in, and he faced a lot of adversity, and he faced up to it, and he played, pretty well against it. Now, it's tough because this season wasn't as good as his Heisman year. It wasn't, just hands down, and it is concerning. I'll say that. I really like the prospect. I agree with you. I think he's going to go number one overall, and I think he deserves to go number one overall. But I will say, it is worrisome when a player kind of almost degresses in their play over their time over, in their senior season, especially when it's all on them instead of just like, all of his weapons are kind of going into the NFL, and now it's just kind of him. So it's interesting. In the game we went to, it looked like he was, the best player on that team, and it was clear. They just didn't really have anyone to help him out. But I've seen in other games, you look back to like that Utah game, not the case. I think he struggled in that game a little bit. It was a low-scoring game, and that's not what you want to see in NCAA football. But I'd be curious to see what you think about that this past season as compared to his previous season, his Heisman season. I know we kind of talked about it a little over the course of the year, but like, what does that make you think of? Like, what is that? Like, are there any red flags that go off in your head when you see that happening to a quarterback, especially a number one overall prospect?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue that season was anything other than a complete failure. USC not only didn't win a lot of games, USC didn't really look good in the games that they did win.
Mm-hmm.
So it's tough. But my biggest thing with Caleb Williams is, like, we've been harping on it the entire episode. You specifically have been calling out a lot, and it's specific things. It's intangibles. It's stuff you can't teach, right? You can't teach some of the stuff that Caleb Williams has. If you're watching on YouTube, has entered the chat. He is the pup down here, the fluff ball right next to me. The biggest thing about Caleb Williams, like I was saying, is he's got all of this stuff that you can't teach.
Hmm.
That isn't necessarily not going to translate over a college season, right? Like expect this guy to have way more yards and way more production than he did. It's also the other argument, right? Of when we were talking about Daniels, when we were talking about Michael Penix Jr., when we were talking about all these different guys, how do you rate the other 4 years of tape? Because Caleb Williams is only a junior. He's not a senior coming in this draft, so he could have come back to the NFL and had another season this year. He could have come back and done it, but he didn't do it because he's the number one consensus overall pick, right? So I do value this season, and I do definitely think it was a failure, but it's not enough of a failure for me to be like, ooh, I got to take him off number one completely. Trevor Lawrence never had a bad season, right?
Hmm.
These guys that get picked number one, they never really technically had a bad season. Joe Burrow only had one season. So, it's a tough argument. It's how much you value the tape, and you nailed it. How many guys USC lost? They lost so many guys into this NFL draft. I think it might have been the most USC players drafted literally ever.
It was a ton.
If not, it's got to be top 5 in the history of their school. But they lost everybody, and it was like all new everything. You know what I mean? Because of the coaching staff, because of the success the previous year, because of everything, and they got put in front of a lot more tough teams than they did the previous season. So, where do you value Caleb Williams? And where do you rate the other USC players on the offensive side, right? Because the game where you and I went, I saw at least 4 to 5 passes, minimum. Those were the ones we were watching. That's one that I was watching, the ones I was
Mhm.
watching, right? The ones I missed to go to the bathroom, right? And had to wait in that line. But how many of those was on him? You know what I mean?
Not a lot.
I'm watching those 4 or 5 throws, and I'm like, okay, at the receiver, you can tell ran the wrong route. Every time you see it, he's like, no, you should have that, or you should have gone out, you should have gone up. So it's like I'm the biggest blamer of the other part of USC other than Caleb Williams, but
As you should
didn't
be.
this season.
You should be.
This season wasn't enough for me to push him off the top. Now, so want to follow up question. Quarterback is the hardest
Mhm.
position to evaluate, and it's not even close. So Trevor Lawrence, do you consider him now a slam dunk at number one? Probably not. Justin Fields at number 2? Probably not. Andrew Luck, when he was there in Indianapolis? Probably, and then he retired out of absolutely nowhere. Um, Absolute legend in the Civil War reenactment game too, shouts out there. Neckbeard. But Caleb Williams is in that class, and it's just that simple. And again, I listen to a lot of experts, and every draft expert that I listen to, all off of his board, and also, like you just said, watched that game, and a lot of them wasn't his. Yes, of course he made bad decisions. Of course, every quarterback does. If he made a bad decision, his receiver wasn't in the vicinity. Like, it's not like he made a bad decision because his receiver made a bad read. It's like he made a bad decision, and his receiver's not even there to even get the ball.
Mhm.
The receiver ran the wrong route. So blaming USC a lot on that one. And you know what? If he falls, if he doesn't get taken number 1 overall, which would be absolutely insane, maybe other experts believe it too. But I think that this player is slam dunk number 1 overall. Jumping into our next segment, we're going to talk NFL here. We're going to get those quarterbacks, most likely first round prospects that we're talking about. Maybe a second round prospect slips in there. But I'm going to go ahead and name the teams. We're going to go back and forth to see if this team needs a quarterback. Started off, we already kind of gave it away. Chicago, right? We got Chicago here at number 1. He's going there, right? Caleb Williams is going to Chicago pretty easy.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the thing you have to think about too is like how much time has Justin Fields had with this team? You know, like it's just so much time, and there have been literally almost zero results. You know, they added DJ Moore this offseason, and they're still not getting the results they want. They didn't make the playoffs. They were close, but they weren't that great of a team. You know, obviously, Justin wasn't healthy for the entire season, but you know, still, it's over the course of his time in Chicago. I think it's over. You know, the fans kind of want him to stay, but he's just not putting up the numbers that you need. He's not. that quarterback, that franchise quarterback. I think that's going to lead you into the future, and I think you can get a little bit of draft capital for him if you want to trade him and get a new guy in there because I'm a big proponent of seeing what they can do over a course of like 3-4 years, and if after that's still not working, it's probably not going to work after that. So I don't think it's working, and in my opinion, I think you should get rid of him, and I think you can get a little bit of a couple picks for him, and some team will take him, I promise, and some team is going to want him because he does have talent, but I just don't think it's enough to be a starter for in this system for much longer. It's a good system. You put Caleb Williams back there though, I think it changes. I think it changes dramatically.
Completely. Washington sitting at number 2 clearly is in need of a quarterback. They're also still in need of a head coach. We'll hit that in our next segment with rumors there for Washington. But I think Washington takes a quarterback here. Do you think Washington takes a quarterback at number 2, or do you think they go another position, Tanner?
Well, I mean, the question is, do you think Sam Howell is the quarterback of the future? And in my opinion,
No.
I don't think so. He had a pretty good season, but not anything outstanding. And Washington's been looking for a quarterback for a long, long time. So they finally have a really, really high pick, and I think they're going to use it on a quarterback here, whoever it may be. I
think
number 2.
I think
I think it really could be Jaden Daniels, or obviously some of the other guys you mentioned. But I think 2 is where it starts to vary a little bit. Michael Penix, obviously, I think that would be the favorite. But a lot of times Washington doesn't do the right thing.
that's very true, especially in recent draft years. And whoever they've let go on their team when they shouldn't. We talked about that in a recent episode. Agreed. There are all points on Washington. I don't think Sam Howell's necessarily the guy of the future. Prove me wrong, right? Like, prove me wrong if he is. He definitely didn't have a bad season, but at the same time, he kind of started real hot and kind of fell down. Not too bad, over 3,000 passing yards. That's solid, but you do have Terry McLaurin. You did have Brian Robinson there as well coming out of the backfield. So he had options. It's not like he didn't have any options. So would have liked to see a little bit better, but yeah, I don't necessarily think you can hang your franchise on him. Being at number 2 really hurts because I think number 1 and number 2 are a massive difference in this draft. Washington has already failed on their previous number 1 pick, which was RG3. I don't know if they're going to trade ever again to go up to number 1. This is a draft they should probably do it if they do because they're right there. I think this is Drake May locked. I think Drake May is going here. I don't think that Drake May is going to be there in 5 years. But this is my favorite pick because, like I said, Drake May is my number 4 guy. I've got 2 guys in front of him, but if I was Washington, I'd definitely go for Michael Penix or Jaden Daniels here. But I think Drake May is going to be the guy that goes here. New England at number 3. That's a one right now where it's Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi. So I definitely think this team is going to go quarterback here. I think it's 1, 2, 3 quarterback. It's really interesting what you said about Washington. How Washington is not necessarily a slam dunk quarterback team or pick. You said it starts maybe here. So that's interesting. That also tells me that number 2 could be a spot that Washington trades out of because if they don't want a quarterback, number 2 obviously is going to be a quarterback. They could trade out of it. New England, I do think, is going to go quarterback here. Think New England's going to go quarterback, or do you think Bailey Zappi and old Mac Jones are the answer?
I really think, just touching on your Washington point, because I kind of thought of something. Washington's a rebuilding team. They're a team that wants picks, and they're a team that wants a lot of picks. That's why we saw they got rid of Chase Young. They got rid of Montez Sweat. That's kind of their game plan right now. So I could 100% see Washington trading out of this pick for, maybe someone who's at New England, who's maybe potentially could trade up, or someone who's behind New England who wants to trade up for a quarterback. So I really think the possibility of trading up could start at Washington. I don't think the Patriots will trade out of their position. If anything, maybe a trade up to get in front of someone else. If the conversations are like that in the draft room and they kind of have to. But I really think Washington could be a candidate to trade out of, just because, like I said, look at what Houston did with their roster. C.J. Stroud, very, very excellent quarterback, but he wasn't the first off the board. And if you want your guy, go get him. So I think this year's a great year to get a quarterback, but it's also a great year if you're in Washington's position to get a lot of picks. Anyways, to talk about your Patriots point, 100% of quarterback is going to go here. It's basically, I think it's going to be between Michael Penix and Jaden Daniels, because I think Michael Penix would thrive in a Patriots system. I really do, because I think he's a pocket passer first who can extend the plays with his legs and get first downs and things of that nature. And I think that's just a perfectly sound and consistent quarterback for a new head coach. So I would say if Penix is not off the board, if they do go with Drake May at number 2, or someone goes with Drake May at number 2, Caleb Williams is number 1, I think Penix could come off the board, and I think he could go to New England. That would be my guess, if, obviously the other two scenarios line up.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Arizona at number 4 with Kyler Murray. He's on a massive contract. Personally, I don't think that if you get 3 quarterbacks taken, Arizona's realistically going to sit there at number 4 when they already are paying Kyler that much money, and the promise that he's shown at his time there, quite honestly. I don't think the Cardinals walk away from him yet. Number 4 pick there with Arizona. How do you evaluate Kyler Murray? Right? Like, what do you think? Do you think Arizona is going to evaluate this or continue to have him on the team? Like, they can't get rid of him, and they can't bring in a guy.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you bring in a guy at number 4, that's the writing on the wall, and Kyler is probably the one guy in the NFL that could – one guy. There's a lot of guys in the NFL that can walk away. But Kyler, seems to me like that guy that would just straight up walk away. You know what I mean? And be like, I'm not – sorry, not happening. I'm paid to be the starter here. I'm not. If I'm not the starter here, I'm not going to be here. And the dude's already a full-time streamer and has so many other things going on off the field. It's he realistically could. Do I think he's going to? No. But what do you think here with Arizona? What do you think here with OK1?
I've already kind of cast my vote if you're looking online, but it's no. From the whispers I've heard in Arizona, I think that Kyler Murray's the guy. I think they're going to stay with him. And I think that the organization likes him a lot. And I think that they like, surprisingly, his work ethic a lot, which is kind of something that's been questioned over his NFL tenure. I think that he's gotten a lot better, at that kind of stuff. I think that he's become a lot more mature when it comes to being a professional quarterback in the NFL, doing the things that you need to do. And I think that the organization realizes that. And I think they're going to continue to stay with Kyler, especially like you said, if there's 3 quarterbacks that go off the board before him, there's not really a point when you have Kyler Murray sitting right there. So there's no point in making drama when you got guys like Marvin Harrison Jr. sitting on the board. You know what I mean? So it's I think that's where I would go, in my opinion. Pair him with, a guy who's an absolute phenomenon. You saw how he was with DeAndre Hopkins. That team went 8-0. Obviously, they didn't finish the season that great, but team was nasty. Kyler Murray, you give him a number 1 target, especially a guy like that, Marvin Harrison Jr., who can do pretty much anything you want him to. Yeah, I think they'll be just fine together, especially with Kyler. I think this is not going to be a quarterback. I really don't. I think that they're locked in for Kyler for the foreseeable future. Could be very wrong. We could have some surprises, but what do you think? What do you think they're going to do here?
I don't think any of these guys are going to give you an upgrade, Kyler Murray. So personally, I don't see them taking a quarterback here. Marvin Harrison Jr. is another guy that's a really great point. That's a guy. He's a wide receiver target that you could be trading up for. You really could be trading up for a wide receiver, which is absolutely crazy. And if you look historically in the first round, not a ton of wide receivers hit in the first round at all. Not at all. But in the recent years, you've had success like Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. And if you have these guys that can come in and transform a team that quickly, that fast, NFL GMs are now taking notice. And when you have a guy that is levels above everybody else with Marvin Harrison Jr., it's really hard to not take him top 5. So I completely agree here. I think this year, not going to see, the first taken other than a quarterback be a defensive player or an offensive lineman, kind of like you usually see in drafts.
Mm-hmm.
This year, the first player taken that's not a quarterback is going to be Marvin Harrison Jr. 100%. Great call on that one. And number 5, the Chargers. No shot. Justin Herbert's there. Harbaugh is there as well. Herbert is the guy going forward. Mark with the New York Giants at number 6. Jones. He did not play well this season. He was hurt a lot this year. Remember, you are now looking at the fourth quarterback in the draft right now. We were wrong
Mhm.
about DeVito. We were 100% wrong about DeVito on that one. He started and then kind of went away real quickly. We when we eat our words, we definitely tell you, and we do. Um, the Giants here. I think the Giants go quarterback. I really do
Really?
because the guy that's left is going to be, in my opinion, Michael Penix Jr. or Jaden Daniels. These are the only guys that are going to be left, and after that, I do think it is a significant drop off with Bo Nix and JJ McCarthy, who both of them are arguably. I mean, Bo Nix is arguably a second round grade for me, and JJ McCarthy is a second round grade for me. So these are the last first round quarterbacks I have on my board. They're already gone at number 6.
Mhm.
So that's what could possibly happen. That's how good these guys are, and that's also the gap between these guys. If you notice, there's a huge gap between the top heavy of the quarterback prospects. You go to the second round, and then there's a huge gap, like I said, in the third round to the fourth round. So I do think Giants here could potentially go quarterback. Only way they don't is if someone like Marvin Harrison Jr. is sitting there, but that kid's not getting out of the top 5. Think the Giants go quarterback here, or do you think they stick it out with Daniel Jones?
I think it's very possible they could. I mean, the fact of the matter is Daniel Jones is under contract, I think, for the next 3 years, right? He got paid the offseason right before this season started, right? So, and I think he took a 4 year deal. It's either 4 or 5. I'm not really sure, but it's something in that ballpark. Needless to say, you got him under contract for at least 3 more years. So it's like I don't really know what you do with Daniel Jones at that point. With the Justin Fields situation over in Chicago, at least his contract is coming to an end, right? You can kind of get out of it a little easily, but with Daniel Jones, you just signed this guy for $40 million a year, and that's
So Daniel Jones, actually, you nailed it. He signed a 4-year, $25.4 million contract for the Giants. That's his rookie contract. That's definitely not right. He signed over $130 million. So they've already restructured his contract, but he's a free agent in 2027.
okay.
That's
2027. So
that's
yeah,
what I wanted to say. Keep going.
3 more years, essentially under contract. And what do you do with him? If you bring a new guy in, because obviously, in my opinion, I don't think Daniel Jones is going to start, you know, teaching his replacement. He's a good guy and all, but like I wouldn't. You saw Aaron Rodgers. Obviously he kind of did with Jordan Love, but only because he was there for 4 years. The Giants could have a situation like that where they let a guy sit for a while and then see when he's ready to go, which is probably the best move. But I mean, the Giants are probably not going to do that. I just don't think that they're going to have a guy sit behind Daniel Jones. I don't know. It's a really weird situation. Daniel Jones is obviously not the answer, but it kind of comes back to what we talk about in previous episodes. If you don't have a guy that's better than Daniel Jones, then why would you kind of spend a lot of draft capital on him? You know what I mean? Like I think the biggest one that I've seen was Jordan Love, where it was like at the end of the first round. It wasn't even like a top 10 pick like this. In my opinion, I don't think they go quarterback here with Daniel Jones under contract. Maybe if he has another bad season, we could see something different. But I don't think the organization is going to take a chance on another quarterback when they have one that's, I'll say, this good and has had success in the past under contract and ready to go for the next season. And I don't know. I think they're going to, they could go a lot of other ways. They really need a lot of other pieces. So really anything else is up for grabs for them.
Exactly. The Tennessee Titans are sitting there at number 7. If the New York Giants don't take a quarterback, I do think that the Titans,
Really,
like, look at every single year that they've had recently,
true.
they've taken a quarterback in the
Yeah.
first or second round. So I think the Titans are a team that is potentially, good to take a quarterback here. Atlanta Falcons are right there behind him at number 8. That's another team that needs a quarterback, and if that fourth guy's sitting there, then I think it's a possibility. And then you have Chicago sitting there at 9. You have the Jets sitting there at 10. So that finishes out the top 10 picks. And like Tanner and I were saying, There's really 4 guys that we think are going to go pretty early on in this draft and or mid rounds of this draft. If anybody's going to fall, it could be a Jaden Daniels or a Michael Penix Jr. But is Bo Nix, you know, going to be taken in the first round, right? Is JJ McCarthy going to slip in the first round, right? So the top 10, for sure, at least 3 quarterbacks being taken, potentially 4. Tennessee sitting there, definitely maybe. Atlanta needs a quarterback, but you brought up a really good point. You've still got guys like Justin Fields out there.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Kirk Cousins. You've got a ton of guys out there that you really don't know their future and could easily be a starter on another NFL team. So, that's why, we're 87 days out at this point, 86 days out at this point in the draft. We're already talking possibilities, and in 80 days, I guarantee you this draft order is going to be completely different. But that's why this is a fun part. But number 11, Minnesota, going there. Kirk Cousins, we don't know his future. Denver has made it pretty dang apparent that they want to get rid of Russell Wilson, and I don't think the Denver Broncos are going to sit there at number 12 and hope their franchise quarterback falls to them. This is a team that is a candidate to trade because not only do they have a guy that they don't want, I'm not saying Russell Wilson's going to get a first-round pick. They have some draft capital that they could use to get up and go get a player. Do you think Denver is a team that sense to possibly trade up and also probably needs a quarterback this year? Maybe not in the first, but at least in this draft.
Yeah, 100% they need a quarterback. I mean, it's pretty dang obvious that they don't like Russell Wilson. Sean Payton, I think, wants his own guy. I think he wants to develop a quarterback from scratch, and he's pretty good at it. Drew Brees is, enough talent alone. He also liked Tony Romo a lot too, which is pretty fun. But no, 100%. I think that they could 100%, trade up to maybe even that pick with the Giants. I think that Giants pick is going to be a very sought after pick. I think that Atlanta pick is going to be a very sought after pick. I don't know. I think you're going to see a lot of trading up, and I think it's going to be by these quarterback needy teams because, like we said, there's a lot of quarterbacks coming out this year, and a lot of teams kind of need them, which is kind of nuts. But I think that Atlanta at number 7 with the Giants at number 6, I'd be really surprised if both of them sat and pick. I really would. Same with Washington, like I mentioned earlier. Tennessee, maybe, but I think you get to this, like the back half, the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I think you're going to see some trades going in and out. Because like you said, you're not going to sit and wait for a quarterback to come to you if you're at the number 12 pick. You saw what New England did with Mac Jones. That didn't work out very well. So it's like if you want a quarterback, if you want a good one, you're going to have to get in the top 10 at least. Because that historically, that's kind of where they go. That's where the good ones are.
Yeah, and you get, lucky when you pick at the end of the first round and you're Harbaugh and you take Lamar Jackson, right? You just get lucky sometimes.
But you said, Lou, they have a very, very good quarterback that is willing to trade. They have someone on the roster that you can make that kind of trade with. It's like, okay, give me your pick and we'll give you Russell Wilson and maybe, throw in some picks around it as well. And then that'll completely change a franchise like Tennessee, like Atlanta, like New York, specifically the Giants, something like that. I think that can be 100% where they go, and bang, and then you get the number 12 pick out of it too if you're that team plus Russell Wilson, so it's like, okay, so 100%. I think that they could trade up, and I think Russell Wilson will be used as trade bait.
Possible scenario there already, over 80 days out, and we're already coming up with them.
You got to think about it.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's when you see the most trades, right? In that getting into the teen range, in the late ones getting into the teen range. But yeah, I mean, New York Giants sitting there at number 6, Tennessee at number 7, Atlanta at number 8. They're all teams that could potentially trade. Sure. Chicago's sitting there at number 9. Obviously, they already took their quarterback number 1, so they're not going to go. New York Jets, I don't think, like I said, are going to take a quarterback when they have Aaron Rodgers. Minnesota, we need to see what's going to happen with Kirk Cousins. Denver, we already talked about Russ, Las Vegas. Big one. You
I've seen
don't know
that.
what's going to happen with that team. Jimmy Garoppolo is still on the books, but
Hmm.
in my opinion, Vegas isn't a team that's going to draft a quarterback and wait to develop, especially with the roster they have now. I think the Raiders are going to be a team that trades to get their veteran quarterback and or someone that's open on the free agent market, because you have Devontae Adams, you have Josh Jacobs, you have a new head coach. Like they need a quarterback for this city, and I don't think Jimmy G's the guy. I don't think Aiden O'Connell's the guy. So there's a possibility to get a guy at 13, but remember, once you're getting in, like we said, after this top 10, not these guys aren't necessarily starters week one when you get them outside the top 10. So maybe Vegas has another year with Aiden O'Connell and then has and rocks Jimmy G as well. But I see them being a team that's going to trade for a veteran quarterback. Orleans sitting there at 14. How do you evaluate Derek Carr's play over this year? Indianapolis sitting there at 15. Already got their guy. He just tore his ACL with Anthony Richardson.
Hmm.
Seattle, they've already got their guy with Geno Smith. Las Vegas, do you think they are in need of a quarterback as well?
Yep, absolutely. They are.
And you have New Orleans. Derek Carr, there's no way they just don't let him come back. You know what I mean? Like Derek Carr's coming back to New Orleans,
I
right?
think so. I think so. From what I've seen with that head coach in like press conferences and stuff, is they're kind of sticking with their guys. They're going to run it back and kind of see where they can develop this group too.
And Anthony Richardson in Indianapolis showed a lot of promise. I thought he started a little bit too early, especially with his limited number of games in college.
He looked good.
Honestly, I told you so with the injury, but I told you so if you listened to me last year. Seattle, how is a new head coach going to evaluate their quarterback going forward? Him being Geno Smith, is that actually the guy, or is the new head coach going to try to bring in somebody else? Uh, I don't think realistically there's a guy here at 16 that's going to give you a better option because I think that fourth quarterback is going to already be taken by this point. So I don't think a Bo Nix or a JJ McCarthy is going to sneak into the draft, especially in the top 15 here or top 16 here. Jacksonville, no way they go away from Trevor Lawrence. I'm sorry. You cannot convince me of that. Cincinnati,
No.
Joe Burr, come on. Uh, the Rams with Matthew Stafford this year. I mean,
Maybe.
the fact that it's a possibility that the Rams right here are the first team that can actually take a quarterback. Matthew Stafford's almost a veteran that's going to be teaching him. So that's an option, right? That's an absolute option right there. If you have some of the guys that maybe fell, like a JJ McCarthy or a Jaden Daniels actually fell, then I think the Rams would absolutely scoop the guy up. You go into a lot of teams that really don't need quarterbacks, in my opinion. Miami, I skipped Pittsburgh. That is the only team in the 20s that I think does need a quarterback, clearly with Kenny Pickett. What guy at the end of this? I mean, is JJ McCarthy in a couple years going to give you a better chance to win than Kenny Pickett? I don't know if how Mike Tomlin and his general manager are going to evaluate that. Same question with Bo Nix. Bo Nix to me almost is a little bit better than Kenny Pickett is at this point, but I didn't have Kenny Pickett as a first round grade in my opinion. So
I think Pickett's gonna stay. You gotta keep him. I mean, what has he had? 2 seasons? No, I'm not saying he's been good.
that's it.
I'm not saying he's been good, but I think this team is kind of they don't really turn over a lot when it comes to coaching staff, players, stuff like that. They like to keep their guys in house. It's Pittsburgh. Mike Tomlin's been there forever, and I think they're going to continue to try to develop Kenny Pickett.
Started here first. Fins. I don't think that they go away from Tua, especially with the explosive offense they had this year. Yes, they fell apart at the end of the season, but there's not a guy that's going to come in here that has a deep ball that can even hit those two guys at this point. If Drake May's not there, if Michael Penix is not there, there's not a guy that's going to be able to hit Tyreek in stride, in my opinion, walking in day one. I think Tua stays. Philadelphia, Jalen Hurts, no shot. Houston from Cleveland there at 23. CJ Stroud, no shot they trade. Dallas has already come out and said they're going to try to re-sign Dak Prescott in this offseason. So no. Green Bay sitting there at 25. Jordan Love is clearly the guy. Tampa Bay at 26 is a question mark. That's the end of the first round. We don't know if Baker Mayfield's going to be signed to a long-term contract. If you get a guy like Bo Nix, it is a faster version of Baker Mayfield, in my opinion, and could potentially be better accurately than Baker Mayfield in a couple years. But once again, you still need a couple years for that. and there's a reason he didn't declare after his 2022-2023 season with Bo Nix. He came back and continued to get progression in college. There's a reason for that, right? I don't think he would have been a first round pick then. So Tampa, maybe, right? That's a team that could maybe go in there and take a quarterback. Have Arizona from Houston at 27. We already talked about Arizona. Buffalo is not going to get a quarterback with Josh Allen. Jared Goff almost got to the Super Bowl. We're going to talk about that next segment. Then you got Baltimore there at 30, and then either Kansas City at 31 or 32 with San Francisco. So kind of flip-flop those. So you see a theme in this game. You see a theme. A lot of the teams that need quarterbacks from the top 10. Why is that? Because it's a quarterback-driven league. If you have a really good quarterback, usually you're not picking in the top 4 or top 5 or top 10 unless they have a season-ending injury.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, Bengals sat there and picked at 18, and Joe Burrow was out. This year had probably the most quarterback injuries ever, if not very close to it, and the bad team still ended up being bad, right?
True.
So that's it for college football. We're going to jump to NFL news now. The Chiefs take down the Ravens 17-10. What happened to Baltimore?
What happened to Baltimore? The best team in the NFL. Clearly, we also have another spectator. Excuse me for a second. Wait, let Venus say hi. Hello, everyone. If you're watching on the YouTubes, you can see a little. Oh. Sorry about that. If you're watching on the YouTubes, had a little bit of technical cat difficulties, but we're back, and she was a spectator, but now she's not. Anyways, with Baltimore, Venus, she's not a big fan of the Baltimore Ravens. She's not a big fan of birds in general. But no, about this game specifically, it's hard. It's really hard because coming into this game, I would say this was the best team on paper, just in general, period. You can't say that on paper the Kansas City Chiefs this season have been better than the Ravens, because they haven't. This is one of the worst seasons of the Chiefs, and a lot of people expected the Ravens to win. I think this Baltimore team just kind of got beat by, Patrick Mahomes at his best. I talked about it last episode. I'm not picking against the greatness of Patrick Mahomes, and I think he went out there and he showed why it doesn't really matter who you are, where you are in the season, or how well you're playing, because he's going to put up his best every single day. And give a lot of credit to that KC defense, because they forced Baltimore to play in a way that they don't play. They forced Baltimore to throw the ball. They forced Baltimore to do a lot of things that they don't usually do. Specifically, Lamar sitting in the pocket and throwing. That's not their offense. It never has been. And it's not what they're good at. I think, again, you have to give a lot of credit to the KC's defense. Baltimore forced them to run. They forced them to get Pacheco on the ground. They forced them to beat them in the trenches, and they did. They really did. Pacheco had a great game, and it kind of seemed like every time they gave him the ball, he was going for 6 or 7 yards, and they couldn't really stop him. So I think it was kind of a perfect storm for KC, and I think Mahomes was just managing the game. It's like, okay, we don't need points here. We're still up. Let's go let our defense, take care of it. And they did. Let's give it another shot here. Let's get Travis Kelce involved more. Let's get the open receivers the ball. Like Mahomes was clinical in this matchup, and Baltimore really wasn't. I don't want to blame Lamar Jackson, this game on Lamar Jackson, but he was a lot of the reason for why they didn't win. You look back at that fumble where he's sitting in the pocket, stripped him right out of his hand. It's Lamar Jackson, man. Get out of there. Do something else. It's interesting, that interception when he threw it up into triple coverage from Isaiah Likely should have been called pass interference probably. But don't give the defense a chance to do that, if you're Lamar. Maybe don't throw it up into triple coverage, even if Isaiah Likely says he's open. So, it's hard because Lamar's had an amazing season. It's hard to put this loss on him, but I don't think he played at his best. I don't think the Ravens defense played at their best. They looked slow. They couldn't tackle, and they left a lot of guys just wide open. It really stunk. And I think the biggest thing about this game is they didn't look like Baltimore. That did not look like the Baltimore we saw all season long. In fact, how many times do you think the Ravens ran the ball without Lamar Jackson running? Excluding his stats, running the ball. How many times do you think they ran it?
I mean, it had to be very close to 10 times.
It was 8. 8?
Yeah, nailed that.
8 total times with Justice Hill, Gus Edwards, and Zay Flowers. So Gus Edwards, Justice Hill both ran the ball 3 times. Zay Flowers ran the ball twice. And that's a receiver. That's not a running back. So they're trying to get creative with it, but it's just not working. I think if you're the Ravens, that's what this season was built on. You know what I mean? Like they've ran the ball extraordinarily well. That's why we call them one of the best teams in the NFL, because they can run the ball. And in January, the teams that can run the ball usually win. And they got away from it. They just completely, I think, abandoned their game plan, and then just kind of were forced to throw the ball in a situation where I don't think you needed to. I think they were having success running the ball. Like in that drive where Zay Flowers caught that touchdown, they were running the ball very well. And that, they play action, boom, huge shot to Zay. And that's why it happened, because there's things that of that nature that are happening. Things are happening to those eyes of the defensive players. You run the ball well, and that makes you play action well. That's just like a staple of this sport. And they got away from it. They did. I was really surprised that you didn't see Gus Edwards have, 6 carries, 7, 8 carries. Justice Hill have 8 carries, just in a game where KC's rush defense isn't that great. It's not. They got Chris Jones, and they don't got a lot else when it comes to rush defense. Nick Bolton, he's played pretty well, but over the course of the season, they haven't been that great. Baltimore coming into this, this postseason had the most rush attempts in the NFL, the most yards gained, I'm pretty sure, in the NFL, rushing yards specifically. What happened? You know what I mean? They had under 100 yards rushing with Lamar Jackson. He ran for 8 times, I think about 40 yards, but that's not enough, man. You know what I mean? They just didn't look like Baltimore. I think that it just boils down to that. They just got away from their game plan, where I think it was pretty easy to implement. In the drives that they looked good, their game plan was, their strength, and they got away from it. The turnovers obviously were pretty big, and Mahomes didn't mess up. It wasn't the prettiest game. It's never been the prettiest game all season from the Chiefs, but they didn't mess up. The Ravens did. That's why they lost, man. They got to stick to their game plan if they wanted to win this game. They didn't, and they lost. What did you see? Because I'm curious to see what you think about it.
I mean, it was a winnable game, right? Like it was 10-17 at the end of the game. Lamar Jackson was driving down the field and threw to like you said, Likely, who definitely threw his hand up saying he was open. But when there's 3 guys running in the end zone, and that is literally both safeties and the corner there, like that's exactly what Kansas City wanted you to do in that situation. They baited you into that, and you actually threw it. Just a bad decision right there. Probably his worst throw of the entire season.
Mm-hmm.
You saw the frustration as soon as the sideline, or as soon as the cam do him on the sideline, and he threw his helmet in frustration and looked right when he looked at the tablet. I mean, like he saw it right when he looked at the tablet and was like, "I cannot believe I made that throw." Um, I know I saw on ESPN today that Stephen A. Smith was saying that Lamar choked. I think he got the wrong game. I think the Lions choked. I don't think the Ravens choked. The Ravens were never up. I don't know how you choke when you're not up. But the last drive, if Baltimore scores, this is a completely different conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you lose to Kansas City in overtime, okay, right? Like you went back, you drove down the field, you scored at the end of the game like you needed to. Pat didn't get the ball with any time left, right? Because he wouldn't have, because it was very close to the end of the game if they would have converted that. Well, he would have got the touchdown if he just wouldn't have made that throw, right? Then it would have been a completely different game, and even better for clock management. But anyway, I understand why people throw the ball in the end zone at the end of the game and give Pat like 2 minutes. I'm sorry, you cannot do that. But it didn't happen because he threw an interception in triple coverage. But have to blame the game on Lamar. You have to, like you said, give Kansas City's defense all the credit in the world. The annoying part to me in that game was that Baltimore was having success running the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And they just played like they were down by 24 points the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that when Travis Kelce has 11 catches for over 100 yards and it's not even the fourth quarter yet, you're probably pretty scared and your game plan's not going well. But you're only down by 10, by 7 points, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're not down by a lot of points at any point in this game.
No.
I don't don't really understand the play calling in my opinion. Um, but once again, Lamar Jackson had time back there. And I know you don't, the game plan isn't having Lamar sit back in the pocket and having to throw the receiver wide open. But when you have that much time in the pocket, you can't really say that the game plan, is lost by Baltimore at that point or lost by Kansas City at that point because they gave Baltimore chances.
A lot of them.
There were guys that were open down the field. There was multiple times where I paused the game and looked and was like, that guy's open. Lamar just didn't see him because Lamar's doing his thing and running around, which is what you pay Lamar to do. But when you have Lamar Jackson and he doesn't even have 50 rushing yards in the game, like you're probably not going to win the game. Then you go look at the running backs, like, oh, maybe the running backs went off. No, they didn't. Like if you are forcing the Baltimore Ravens to throw the ball all the time, that is not the game plan that they want. And my biggest thing is just I don't understand why they didn't run the ball more because they were having so much success. If you didn't have success on first down, don't necessarily go away on second down, right? Just kind of continue to pound the rock because eventually you will get success. And Chris Jones was hurt at the end of that game. So I really don't understand why they didn't run the ball at the end of the game as well. Do you know any additional moves the Ravens need to make? I mean, obviously a wide receiver. They have Zay Flowers that's going to be turning on to be his number one wide receiver. But is there any other moves that are standing out to you that they need? Because to me, really not. Like, there's really not a ton of moves that I think that they could make that would make them a hands down better team. But draft well. So you know that the Ravens will
Mhm.
continue to draft well and we'll get additional players that way. They could lose a couple players off of contracts, but are there any positions that the Ravens need to go out and get?
No, we talked about it this season. They were the best team on paper, I think, in the NFL. That wasn't the San Francisco 49ers, because, that team is just absolutely disgusting on paper. And this team was the best team all year in the AFC, and no one could deny it. They beat the Niners, they beat the Lions, they beat good teams, like very, very good teams this season. And everyone was like, it's awesome. This is the team to beat right now in the NFL. And I don't know. I don't know what they can go and get. In my opinion, nothing. I would just run it back the exact same way and continue to do what you want to do. And try and implement your game plan more. Maybe get a couple more offensive minds on that staff. But realistically, this is a scheme you've been cooking up for the past 6 years. You know what I mean? Ever since you got Lamar Jackson, you've been preparing this scheme. Running this scheme, and he should know it very, very well. So in my opinion, I think I would go and get maybe a big body receiver. It's what I think that they've always wanted. In my opinion, I think that would transform this offense. Rashad Bateman really hasn't been the guy that you thought he had or thought he was. Zay
A big
Flowers,
bust.
really good. He's very great, but he's that home run guy. In my opinion, I would love to see someone, get me like an AJ Brown in there. Give me like a Mike Evans. I get it that these are go route kind of guys, but they're also big body guys that you can target in the end zone and in the red zone specifically. You want those big dudes, big red zone targets. Obviously, they have Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, which is awesome, but you get a guy who can go up and catch a ball. Someone who's big, who is very physical receiver. Someone like a Michael Pittman or something like that. I think that would transform this offense, and you would have to be covering Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, and let's say, Michael Pittman in there too, because I think he's a free agent this offseason. So T. Higgins is out there too. I think Calvin Ridley would be a great addition. I think, obviously Calvin Ridley is not that big body guy, but he'd still transform this offense as a number 2 to Zay. He could even become the number 1. A lot of good wide receivers are out there. I would just go pursue one of them. Give them a lot of money, man. Just unload the bank for one of them and just let them stay in Baltimore and get used to the system.
I mean, and I'm looking right now at my board right here with all the wide receivers, and I mean there's at least 10 or 15 that's in the top 100 that I have right now. The two guys that are highly touted are, like we've been talking about, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Rome Odunze, but there's a lot of guys that they could get that has that length. Jalen Polk, the wide receiver out of Washington, he's an early second for me, late first. That's definitely an option. Kid out of Oregon, Troy Franklin, really good option there too. He broke every freaking record on the planet: 1,300 receiving yards, 100 targets, 14 touchdowns. That's a guy that you could look at. A guy that isn't necessarily he's pretty much a deep threat, but I would stay away from him. If it was them, would be a Donnie Mitchell, the wide receiver out of Texas. Um, and then there's another guy that's another guy, this counterpart in Texas, Xavier Worthy, kid out of LSU. There's also Keenan Coleman out of Florida State. So there's a lot of guys that you can take right there,
Hmm.
at that spot. And the big time big body wide receiver is what Rashad Bateman should have been,
Hmm.
but he's not. Right, that was a guy that I really liked coming out of college, and he just didn't really kind of like Traylon Burks. They just didn't really hit, and you see that a lot with wide receivers. Once again, specifically taken in the first round. But the Ravens, they're at the end of the first round. So really, they're taking their guy that's going to get taken in the second round right there is kind of the draft strategy that teams typically have at the end of the first round. So I agree with you. I think that if there's an offensive lineman there that should have been taken a little bit early, just add him to the mix. That's one for sure. Your defensive line is absolutely disgusting. Really don't need to do anything there. Maybe an end that maybe a defensive end because you could always use another pass rusher. Their linebackers don't need one,
Nope.
and their corners, with Marlon Humphrey, one of the number one corners in the NFL, and then you have one of the best safeties in the NFL out of Notre Dame, who I loved coming out of the draft with Kyle Hamilton. You could add a corner, you could potentially add another safety there. So there's some options that they could do. But remember, they drafted at the end of every single round, right?
Hmm.
Because of how they finished this season. So they're going to be getting the end of those prospects. Oh, yeah, I could definitely see a big time wide receiver or big ball wide receiver kind of going there, red zone threat type of guy. The thing that I think would be really interesting to me, Baltimore has Gus Edwards, Justice Hill. Like these aren't number one running backs. They kind of have a bell cow system going. No way that J.K. Dobbins is going to just start his like fifth, 16th season because he gets hurt every year. It sucks. No disrespect. Do they look at a guy at the end of the first round that is the clear cut number one running back in this draft? And they draft him a little bit early because there's not a Bijan Robinson. There's not a Jameer Gibbs in this draft. I don't know if a running back's going to go in the first round,
Hmm.
personally. So I think Baltimore could either trade up in the second or maybe take this guy at the end of the first just to have him because Baltimore likes to do that, right? So that's definitely an option there. We'll see what happens with Baltimore. Next question I have, last question on this game. Then we're going to discuss the 49ers and Lions. Then we are done for this episode. Um, Holmes. We have to talk about him. We've talked about him at length. We never like to talk about the same guy over and over and over again, but we do, right? If they're good, we have to, right? We're sports coverers. You know what I mean? We got to cover the sports, right? That's us. Um, Holmes, is this his most impressive season? I know it's not stat wise, but the lack of playmakers on the offensive side, the inconsistency from Travis Kelsey, and the fact that he does not have a wide receiver number one. You think, Tanner, is this Patrick Mahomes' most impressive season to date? Oh, by the way, in the Super Bowl again.
I yeah, I think so. In terms of individual performances, no, I don't think he has had his best game of his career at all during this entire season. In my opinion, that was last year in the Super Bowl. That's the most impressive win I think I've ever had seen from Patrick Mahomes. But there's still a Super Bowl to go, in this season. I think this being the quote unquote worst Chiefs team we've seen in recent memory is just a testament to Andy Reid, Travis Kelsey, Patrick Mahomes, that whole defense, Spagnola, and just really this whole offensive unit as well. It doesn't matter, I think, with the Kansas City Chiefs anymore. I think they get into the playoffs and they're just a different breed. You know what I mean? Travis Kelsey just turns on. It doesn't really matter what you do because he's going to be open. And even if he's not, he's still going to catch the ball. So is it the most impressive? I think in terms of an overall season, yes, because Patrick Mahomes had to go twice on the road in a situation where he's never been before. And he absolutely looked amazing in all of those performances. They had the home game in the wild card, which was awesome. They destroyed the Dolphins, which was at the time not the greatest team, but with a roster with Tyreek Hill, Tua Tagovailoa, and a defense that has been proven, that has been showing up all season long. They destroyed them. They went to Buffalo and beat their biggest rivals and probably the best that Buffalo has ever looked in recent memory. And then they beat probably one of the best teams in the NFL in the Baltimore Ravens, who were supposed to win that game. And they didn't, all because of what they did, because they implemented their will in a hostile stadium, in one of the loudest stadiums in the NFL in Baltimore. And now they're back and going to the Super Bowl against a team that they know
You're in
very well.
Baltimore, Maryland.
Dude, imagine
Dude,
going to Buffalo and then Baltimore and winning both games.
and guess who he plays in the Super Bowl? The Niners. Like
Yeah.
that's not only the hardest playoff road in this season. That's the hardest playoff road in recent memory. Especially when you take into account Buffalo's weather.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you take into account the fact that they played Miami right before that. Like Miami's a good team. You know what I mean? Like Miami's a real good team.
They were a division winner through 16 weeks. They were leading the division for 16 weeks. So you can basically assume that they're a division title team, basically.
And Mahomes just turned it on and did exactly what he does. That's 100% right. That's 100% right. It's like if this team makes the playoffs, they do every season. If this team makes the playoffs, a high likely possibility that they will be in the Super Bowl. There's a very good possibility to be in the Super Bowl. I saw a stat, it was like 4 out of 6 seasons Mahomes has been in the Super Bowl. That's insane. That's absolutely insane. And this interesting stat that I was told yesterday by hanging out with some friends of mine. Shout out Pat. Shout out Mitch. You name the guys that Patrick Mahomes has lost to it in the playoffs. He's only lost 3 times, right? It's Tom Brady and Joe Burrow.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
That's the only people he's lost to. That's it. That's the only guys he's lost to. So it's like, how do you root against that guy, right? You know what I mean? How do you root against that guy? Tanner said it last episode. He is this generation's version of Tom Brady. Is anybody going to get 7 Super Bowl wins? Not sure. Mahomes has already been there 4 times. I really think that Mahomes is going to go to 10 Super Bowls. I really do. Like, you cannot convince me that he's not going to with Andy Reid. Because here's the thing. Take away Travis Kelce in that game. Do they win? Probably not. Probably not. But can you say Mahomes wouldn't have given it to somebody else?
Rashee Rice,
like
these
Rashee
guys.
Rice. Could you like Kelce isn't going to be there the whole time, right? Travis Kelce's not going to be there the whole time that Mahomes is going to be there because Kelce's a little bit older. His brother just retired from the NFL. Are they going to get better? Are they going to get worse? Like it's a dynasty that I think anybody saw coming.
Yeah.
You had Alex Smith sitting there. No disrespect to Alex Smith, but I don't think you saw it coming. And then
I know.
And then and then you draft this kid out of Tech. He doesn't play the first season. Media's saying, I can't believe they drafted him. He didn't play the first season. Andy Reid saying, calm down. Calm down. I got it. And he's got it. Right? Like Andy Reid's absolutely got it. So yeah, I agree. I think he is. I think this is the most impressive season overall, specifically because you look at the team and what he's done in the playoffs. My goodness. Talk on the other side, the NFC side. Then we're wrapping this episode up. 49ers down the Detroit Lions 31-34. The Lions were leading going into half 24-7 and went for it on 4th down twice in the second half, but they did not convert at the very end of the game. Heartbreak, choke, bad play calling. I mean, what do you sum it up to? Because my biggest thing is you've been riding or dying going for that 4th down the entire season. You can't all of a sudden now chalk it up to that.
And I think you nailed it right on the head right there. This is, Dan Campbell came into this team saying that he's going to take names, do other things. He's going to live and die by this aggressive nature. And he's going to bump a few heads on the way. He's going to be aggressive and do it to the very end. And that's exactly what he did. If you're a fan, if you're on the coaching staff, whatever, this was the decision. It didn't matter at what point in the game it was going to happen. It was going to happen. They are going for it in those situations, and that's just how this football team is built. That's just what they're going to do. It doesn't really matter what the situation is. Go look at that Dallas game that we happened this year. They went for it 3 times for the 2-point conversion. They're going to live and they're going to die by the sword because that's just what they're doing. It's a double-edged sword, though. It can come back to haunt you, and in this game it did. Obviously, you look at it back in retrospect, it probably wasn't the right decision. If you're wondering what we're talking about, they're up by 14, I think, with I don't remember how much time is left in the game. It's the third quarter. Yeah, you're up by 14. You have the option. It's fourth down. It's fourth and short. You have the option to take the field goal. They're on the 30-yard line. They opt to go for two. Um, our poor Aggie just doesn't pull it in on that drive. Obviously if he pulls it in, we're
Big
talking
drop.
a lot
Big drop by
different.
Josh Reynolds.
I know Josh Reynolds, usually an absolute stud, usually a guy who always brings in the ball. He's usually really, really good in those situations, but he just has a
He
costly
had two
drop.
key drops.
I know he did.
He had two key drops in this game that on key downs. But yeah, you nailed it. Because the bad part about that, and I'm so glad you brought this up because that's why I asked the question. I was hoping you would bring up that specific instance. They called the right play.
They did.
Josh just dropped it.
He did.
They called the right play, and it was just dropped. You know?
Yeah, and the thing that sucks too is like at that point, let's say they get it and they go down, they get a field goal, they're up by 17, whatever, but they didn't. That would put them up by 3 scores. The thing about that, which I really, really don't like the decision, is just the backlash that comes with it. The things that can happen because of it. They asked Bosa after the game, when was like the defining moment in this game? When did you guys know that you were able to come back? And Bosa said after they missed the fourth down. That's when we went down. You saw that I'm not going to say fluke Ayuk touchdown because it was an athletic play that was really, really impressive from Purdy. He rips the ball downfield. It should have been intercepted. Bumps off the DB's hand right into Ayuk's hand. Their first and goal.
Dropped off his face.
That's
went
right.
off his bucket. went bink and then right into Ayuk's hands.
Yeah, and that's a momentum play. Momentum was switched at that moment.
Completely.
And then the next drive, obviously they scored a touchdown on that drive. The next drive, Jahmyr Gibbs fumbles in like the first play. Same result. They go down, score a touchdown. Boom, we're tied. You're not even losing at that point. You're tied. And then Detroit goes down, and same situation happens. They're on like the 28-yard line, fourth and short. What's Dan Campbell going to do? He's going for it every single time. That's how he's played this season, and I respect the hell out of him for it. But I don't know, man. You go down in that situation, you got a chance to tie the game. You're down by 3, I'm pretty sure at that point. And that's the situation where it wasn't the right play call. You know what I mean? Like you look at that play specifically, the one that the second fourth down, and that wasn't really close at all. There was the ball never even touched the receiver's hands. It was maybe 5 yards away from Amon-Ra St. Brown, who had a pretty good game. But it's just you live by it, you die by it. In my opinion, I didn't think it was the right decision. I think in the playoffs, you should take the points where you need them. I think that on both of those situations, I would have kicked. I've been kind of a big proponent of kicking over going for it this past season, and I've seen so many examples where it just doesn't work out. It just like in this Lions game, momentum just goes the complete other way. It's such a swing. Obviously, if they had gotten both those fourth downs or even one of them, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now, and the Lions probably would have won. Because those would have extended the drive. They got down to the red zone, stuff like that, and maybe even getting a touchdown. But I don't know, man. It's one of those things where it's when it works really well, but when it doesn't, it really doesn't work. So it's tough to see the Lions go out in that way, but they had a lot of chances in the second half, and they just didn't do anything with them. It just looked like it was a completely different team. The defense looked like they switched hands. I think Jahmyr Gibbs had an amazing first half. I think David Montgomery had an amazing first half. I think that they implemented their will. I think that they played Lions football in that first half, and every guy was open. Every running back got like 6 or 7 yards a carry. In the second half, that didn't happen. That they finally figured it out, and they were limiting him on the ground, and they kind of forced Jared Goff into some tough situations. So the pressure in the pocket was collapsing, and it just forced them into bad decisions, fourth downs, and bad coaching decisions. That's kind of what I chalk it up to. I think there's a world where the Lions win this game. There really is. But that's not the world we live in today. Unfortunately, the offense gets taken down by the Niners in the NFC Championship game. And Dan Campbell is still a good head coach. I don't think anyone should be calling for his head. I don't think anybody should be doing anything like that. There's a reason that you got this far, And that turnover from Gibbs, those drops from Josh Reynolds. I saw a stat today that I was watching ESPN, and it was kind of nuts. In that third quarter, I saw that was the 2 drops I'm pretty sure they had this entire postseason. That was the first turnover I'm pretty sure they had this entire postseason with Jahmyr Gibbs. So, take that with what you will. They've been perfect this entire postseason except for that moment in those couple plays, and it sucks. And it's going to define your season. But I think this is a good football team going forward. I don't think anyone should doubt them. Jared Goff has been doing this for the past couple of years in Detroit, and I think they're going to continue to do it. They just got to get more talent, got to get better, and hopefully get a better seed, so they can play at home, get that momentum going. But for right now, the Niners are in the Super Bowl, and we're going to see what happens. What did you think, man? I mean, I'd be curious because I know you've been a big supporter of the fourth down going for it these past couple weekends of football.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's situational football, right? Like
It is.
to hit your first point, I think it's situational football. I think any point in time you can swing the momentum of a game. I personally wouldn't go for it.
Mhm.
Now, Detroit at that point was almost looking to the point of like the jugular, right? Like they're
Yeah.
kind of waiting to like, all right, all we got to do is get one more score, and if we get another touchdown, it's going to be very hard for the Niners to match that, right? You go look at the Niners roster, and you go look at the Niners coaching staff, and you go look at their record in the recent years, and they're always in the NFC Championship game, right? They're always there. And I understand going for it, especially with Dan Campbell, because he went for it more than anybody in the entire league, and it wasn't even close. On 4th and 3, after a 3rd and 3, where it was just your offense looked out of sync, I think at that point you pull him back in and you kind of take the field goal. Personally, for me, I'm a big proponent of going for it when it's 4th and 1. I'm a big proponent of going for it when it's anything more than that because it's crazy. You add on anything more than 1 yard, I feel like some teams will like line up in the shotgun, throw a shotgun pass, like a jet sweep. Like when it's 1 yard, you're running the ball right up the middle. If it's Philly, you're doing the tush push, and if it's Buffalo, you're doing a quarterback sneak.
Hmm.
Like and that's what you do because you'll have more offensive linemen than they will have defensive linemen than people in the box at that point. Statistically, you get that. That's why it's smart to go for it in those situations. But no, me, I wouldn't have gone for it in that situation. Of course, that's hindsight, right? Of course, that's hindsight. Of course, you're not going to believe me when I say I wouldn't have gone for it if I was sitting there, in Dan Campbell's shoes. But that I said before the game is I said, I wonder how fast Detroit comes out of both halves. That was my biggest key to Detroit winning. They checked the box in the first half, but the second half they didn't. What happens when you're deep in the playoffs? You're playing elite teams that are coached by elite coaches. So if something's working in the first half against San Francisco, you can chalk it up that it's not going to work in the second half. Only because that defense is so well, but because that coaching staff is so many veterans on that coaching staff and has so many guys that have been right in this situation before. Oh, and not to mention, look at the freaking roster,
Hmm.
right? Like this is a roster that is easily the best roster in football, in my opinion. When you look at the defensive side and the offensive side, Ravens have a very good argument with them, but it's really hard to argue. I mean, they traded for Chase Young in the middle of the season, right? Like that's their worst pass rusher at this point. It's like that's the worst rusher on the Niners, right? It's insane. But I think that Detroit, absolutely, you saw the momentum shift in that game, and I think that in all of sports, and specifically sports that you can score very quickly, which is pretty much every sport, right? Unless on baseball, you got to get like 3 guys on base, but still, it's over. It's over. As soon as that momentum shifts and you give it to a team, this isn't like this is just Brock Purdy. Doesn't have anybody to throw to or run the ball, right? He has every weapon in the world that he could need. And not only do you give him momentum, you give him good field position. You don't have to make him drive the entire field. You're right there. Right? You know you're coming out with 3 points and you're probably going to get 7 at the end of that drive with where they turn the ball over. And the key drops that the Lions had, And yeah, the play calling, you have to chalk it up to play calling because I understand it worked, but like Tanner said, or I understand it didn't work. Tanner said, like, that's what's going to be scrutinized, right? And like I said,
Mhm.
I don't think that anybody choked in the Chiefs and Ravens games. I think it was this game.
Yeah.
And I think it was the Detroit Lions. And to be honest, when I saw CJ Gardner Johnson waving in the second quarter, I thought to myself, when I saw that, I brought it up. I was like, that's not good. 'Cause if any 49ers player saw that, which they did, it's not going to be a good look because these guys, guess what? They've been here before. Detroit, you haven't. Not in recent years. You have not been here. You have not been in the NFC Championship. When you are going into half 24-7 and you lose that game, that's bad, right? That's not a good look. You had like you scored 34, scored 31, so you had 7 points in that whole second half,
And it was garbage time
right? It
too.
was and it was garbage time too. You nailed it. So, Detroit, yeah, great first half. Great first half. I thought that we were going to have a Kansas City and Detroit Super Bowl, and I couldn't have been happier. But now it's Niners and Kansas City, another, another Super Bowl. What's crazy is this is the first game of this. This was the first game of the season.
Yeah.
Chiefs and the Niners played in the first game of the season, and now they're
Mm-hmm.
they're
Chiefs
playing
and
in the lat
it was Chiefs and Lions. It was almost the first
Chiefs
game
and
of the
Lions. So I'm
same
saying
season.
I'm saying sorry, I said 49ers. Chiefs and Lions were first game of the season, and I wanted that to happen so bad. First and last game of the season. That would have been awesome. But 49ers come in and spoil the day like everybody thought they were going to. Last question I have on the Lions. What do they need to do? Dan Campbell's going to go in there and get whatever guy he wants to drafting. He's going to draft a guy that had a second round grade in the first round. You know what I mean? I think running back is clearly can't do anything more there. Wide receiver, maybe add a third wide receiver.
Hmm.
Quarterback, you're set. Offensive line, you're young and set. Defensively on the Detroit side, I think you could use a little bit more beef, especially because they pick in the end of the first round an interior defensive lineman as possible. Defensive ends always needed. This team is going to get another linebacker. I don't know at what point. And then safeties. I think really the only you need are on the defensive side of the ball. You know what I mean? And obviously, every single team is going to take a tackle or an offensive lineman that falls. But do any positions kind of stick out to you, or are you kind of thinking defensive side of the ball is what Detroit's going to do this draft?
Yeah, I think defense just in general. I think you made a good point with linebacker. Dan Campbell's just kind of that kind of guy who really likes Bill Parcells' way. Can never have enough linebackers, and I think that's gonna completely happen. But I do too want to see more of defensive backs. I know they got C.J. Gardner Johnson in the offseason, but I think they could use like a nice cornerback, a number one cornerback who's going to stick with someone on the sides because, in my opinion, they just didn't really have that in this game specifically. Debo was never really touched, and even when he was touched, he was just kind of shrugging off tackles and stuff like that. And that's Debo. It's Debo. He likes to do that. He's great in space, but get you a guy who doesn't let him have that space. You know what I mean? Just someone who's gonna be really physical. A big physical corner is what I think I want with that team. Just someone who's gonna get in the face. Someone's gonna get really angry. Just someone who's gonna get mean. So that in my opinion, I'd like a defensive back because I think they're pretty set on the D line. I thought they held Christian McCaffrey pretty in check, and I thought they've done a good job of it throughout the season. But I think them rotating their linebackers in and doing all that, I think they've been pretty sound this season. I wouldn't be mad with a big body, a defensive tackle, or maybe even an edge rusher to match up with Aiden Hutchinson. But in my opinion, I would like a defensive back and, you know, maybe even two. Maybe just go defense because that offense is honestly fine. You got one of the best young tight ends in the league. Your offensive line is built to last. Jared Goff's pretty good. Your running backs are fine. You have an extremely young, extremely talented number one wide receiver in Amon-Ra St. Brown, and you have all the targets in the world. So I think the offense fills out itself, and the defense just needs a little working on. And in my opinion, this team's, maybe not right back to the same place they were this year, but they're definitely contending for another Super Bowl. They're contending and they're making a fight for another NFC Championship game at least, But I do want to say too before we get off this subject, we haven't really talked about the Niners and how good they were. I think you got to give a lot of credit of this game to Brock Purdy, man. He's been scrutinized, he's been hated on this entire season because of the roster that's been placed in front of him, but man, he looked really good in this game. I think, he had that interception in the first half, but after that, he came out in the second half and he was throwing dimes. So I think he was making a lot of kind of like these impromptu, these out of the pocket, scrambling around, finding the open receiver, and he's diming up to Brandon Ayuk. He's going to Deebo Samuel. He's getting Greg Jennings involved. He's getting Kyle Juszczyk of all people involved. It's not always going to George Kittle. It's not always going to Deebo Samuel or Christian McCaffrey. In a game where, in my opinion, they limited Christian McCaffrey to what he could do, I think Brock Purdy stepped up, and I think he made that Detroit defense very sad. A very sad day for that Detroit defense. But I really do. I think Brock Purdy played very well. And, I mean, heck, dude, like Mr. Irrelevant in a Super Bowl. Talk about the ultimate chip on your shoulder. I mean, from what I've heard, the guy is just an excellent leader. Everyone's behind him, and he does everything that he needs to do, and he just does it all right. So I just don't think the hate is very warranted for Brock Purdy anymore. I think that he's in a Super Bowl now. He's a Super Bowl quarterback, regardless of if he wins or not. And he looked good while doing it, man. I mean, God, look at him.
I'm right there with you. Absolutely got to give the 49ers props. And, when this roster is that good, you're this close to a Super Bowl, especially, like I said, going into half that much, that's a lot of pressure. That's a ton of pressure, especially at home. This is the year that you think you're going to go to the Super Bowl and everything. And then, all of a sudden they just start hitting in the second half. And that's what happens when you have this good of a roster and every single big name player that they had stepped up. Yeah, McCaffrey didn't necessarily have a big game, but he also had 2 touchdowns when he needed to. And anytime, let me rephrase that. Anytime they gave him the ball, he did something with it. They just didn't give him the ball a ton because Brock Purdy was diming it up and throwing it out. And I understand that the game manager conversation is now over. If it's not, a game manager doesn't necessarily take his team to the quarterback, or the quarterback take his team to the Super Bowl. And being down by that much at half, typically a game manager isn't going to get you back in that game. Typically that game's over at that point. And it's not like, just like you said, it's not like he leaned on Christian McCaffrey the entire time, right? George Kittle didn't catch a ball for the first couple quarters, right? George Kittle didn't even catch a ball. So it's not like he wasn't open, but Brock Purdy is kind of that guy that's throwing to the open receiver. Second half, he threw to George Kittle a lot, but that's because he was the open guy. Like you said, Greg Jennings as well. He made a great catch at the end of that game to pretty much seal the game, actually. But Brock Purdy is no longer a game manager, and Brock Purdy is an elite quarterback now. And it's just that simple, because if you're not a quarterback that is an elite, if you don't make it to this, I mean, you made it to the Super Bowl, right? Like like Tanner said, you are a Super Bowl quarterback now. There's a lot of guys in the NFL that are considered elite in top 5 that have not made it to a Super Bowl. Right, I can think of a lot of guys right now, top 5 in the entire league, that have not made it to a Super Bowl. So there's a lot of questions that have been answered about the 49ers, and we're about to see how good this Kansas City Chiefs team is, because this 49ers team is not going to be sitting there and coming out flat, I don't think, and they are ready for revenge against the Kansas City Chiefs. So that's everything we got this episode. Let's talk more sports next episode, Tanner.
Heck yeah. No more football except for the Super Bowl.
Crazy.